good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be, and welcome to Sales TV, the Americas version. So my name is Alex Abbott. I'm the founder of Sapiro, and let's go round the room. Tim?
Yes, I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm famous for the fact that I wrote the book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers.
A little one behind you there.
There is one. Yeah, it finds its way onto the screen sometimes.
Yeah, almost, Rob.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results. I'm not famous for anything.
Oh,
didn't we agree earlier that you are the professor?
I am the professor, yes.
You're Stato.
What's that?
It's a person that likes statistics.
That's right.
Yeah.
And?
I'm Adam Gray. I'm Tim's business partner and co-founder of DLA Ignite. And I'm, again, not famous for anything, infamous rather than famous, I think.
Excellent.
Infamy.
They've all got it in for me.
So today we have a guest, and in a moment I'd like to bring the guest on, and he can say a few words about himself. But before we do that, let me give you a little bit of a backdrop as to how we know this person. So I worked with him about 15 years ago at a company called Experian Cheetah Mail. He was an SDR at the time. I was a sales rep at the time. And I thought it'd be a good idea to bring Tek onto the show today, because Tek has a really good perspective of how sales has changed over the last 15 years, from SDR to sales manager to sales director. So why don't we bring on Tek, and he can say a few words.
Hi, Tek.
Hi, Tek.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you for having me. So just to introduce myself, I'm Tek Lubiarz. I'm located in Reno, Nevada. Been doing sales for about 18 years. And as Alex pointed out, early into my career, I had the privilege of working with Alex on the same team. Since then, my career has progressed a little bit. I was promoted into field sales and have been doing that for the last 15 or so years. And during that time, I also relocated from Europe to the US. So great to be here. Thank you very much for having me. Also, currently, I work at LiveRamp. I'm a sales director at LiveRamp, specializing in retail and CPG.
So, Tek, tell us, what was life like 15 years ago from a prospecting perspective?
Well, it was a completely different world, I would say. When I started my career, I had a set of activities that I was trying to drive every single week in and week out, and that was about 200 activities. That was spreading. That was really a combination of outbound emails and cold calls, with a vast majority of activities actually being the cold calls. And at the time, it was, I was pretty good at it. So I was able to generate anywhere between 10 to 12 meetings every single month. All right. And by saying meetings, these were actually qualified opportunities. So it wasn't just a meeting where I'll just facilitate an introduction with an account executive, but it was more about, here's a qualified meeting where somebody's looking to make a decision by specific date and has a budget in place and already has a process started. So today we live in a completely different world, and you guys, in your previous shows, you've shared some really great insights as to how the response rates from traditional channels have completely suffered. And I have a point of view as to why this is happening. But yeah, we are in a different world today, and it looks like the strategy, the type of activities, the type of skill set required to succeed in sales is vastly different than what it used to be.
Yeah. I think there's potentially many SDRs and salespeople listening today, struggling to develop pipeline, struggling to have a conversation. not necessarily create a qualified opportunity. I remember years ago that, the role of the SDR or the BDR was to, in some cases nurture, create the conversation, take that right through to a qualified opportunity. It feels like things have changed so much that the role of the SDR today is more about just getting a conversation. We need to speak to someone, full stop. And no longer do they have the luxury of having enough conversations to create a series of qualified opportunities for the sales team to work on. What are you seeing in relation to that and working with SDRs in the last few years compared to previously?
Well, I kind of feel, sympathy and empathy really for SDRs, because, this role usually is, it's a role that young, professionals trying to get into sales go for, right? That's an entry-level sales job.
Yeah.
Most of them having massive aspirations to be successful, make a lot of money. And that's really primarily the reason why people get into sales. They have the idea of being able to make significant amount of money very, very early into their career. But the challenge they face today is that they are given a bunch of tools, right? Where, they are trained on how to set up cadences. Oftentimes these cadences are created by marketers or by another SDR or by their manager. And they, all they do all day long is just really, try to find contacts on LinkedIn, sync it, with the CRM and create a list and put somebody through a cadence that consists of, 10, 15, 20, 30 different touch points that are automated. So I think this kind of relates to my previous point, which is why people are not responding to emails. That's because it's so simple for tens of thousands of sellers and SDRs to just create a campaign that reaches your inbox as a buyer, that you get overloaded and over bombarded with messages that essentially you just tune out of. You don't want to be reading that stuff. So I really feel bad for SDRs that are forced to be using those type of tactics, the data tactics, because the response rate is so low that it must be putting a lot of psychological pressures on those young professionals to be doing all this work and be just living with with data and CRM all the time and different tools and sending campaigns and seeing no results from it, or very little results, right? So in fact, I think most of them trying to getting into an SDR role, they're trying to become sellers, right? They want to be account executives, and if this is their first experience with sales, right, getting no response from people, it is a kind of daunting idea to continue with sales to many, right? And it's just makes it hard to get up in the morning and be happy going into work, right? Yeah. So I really think that that we have this this waterfall effect really of tools enabling SDRs and sellers to over bombard their audiences. Audiences responding to this by not responding to those messages and tuning out. And as a result, we have, people just, hitting the wall with their heads and not really getting the results that are tasked to deliver. And buyers being frustrated with the messages they receive constantly from sellers.
Yeah.
Tek, I want to pick up on something that you said, the campaigns that have 10, 20, 30 touch points. It reminded me of a study I had seen, this goes back 6 or 7 years now, talking about the average number of touch points needed to have a conversation was somewhere around 11. But the average number of attempts by a sales rep was 1.1. So it's no wonder the numbers weren't meeting. So to your point, automation has helped that. Only in so much as now automation means we as the recipients, we're getting touched a lot. I don't think we like all this touching at this point.
That's harassment, bro.
Exactly. The law of diminishing returns says that you cannot continue to do something and expect the same level of result. It's going to produce less and less of a result each and every time. Are we at that point now in sales? Have we surpassed that point now in sales?
From my perspective, I think we are way past that point. And that's just really, reflecting on the recent, 3 years of my career or 4 years of my career, right? When, as a seller, I don't really use automation that much, right? I typically try to send, if I send an email, it is something that is, based on research, based on what I've learned, that's very highly personalized, that, tries to link somebody we know in common and so on. But even that gets buried in 100 or 200 other emails that that reach the recipient's inbox every single morning. And the more the more senior the executive is or the buyer is, the more likely it is that their inbox is 100% cluttered with this kind of stuff, and they probably have some sort of executive assistant going through that stuff to just to get to the emails that are important. So that being said, I started seeing diminishing returns 3 or 4 years ago very profoundly. And I didn't really know what to do with it at the time. I'm like, this is my process. This is what I've been doing for so many years, and it used to work. Did I lose my mojo? Am I not cool to talk to anymore? Right? You start asking yourself this kind of question. Am I the right company? Right? Is the stuff that we are selling, is it perhaps overcrowded in terms of the space? But really, I came into a realization that recipients or buyers, they no longer want to be hit with the messages in the inbox. They prefer to reach out to social media platforms, to resources online, educate themselves about the solutions, potential solutions that will solve and address their problem, and they tend to be more inclined to have conversations with subject matter experts, not salespeople, right? So what can you do as a seller to address that shift in landscape and this kind of newly formed demand of buyers of how to engage? You need to become the subject matter expert, and the only way you can do it is by really educating yourself, sharing your knowledge across social portals, and actually trying to create a brand for yourself that would actually attract buyers to come to you. Because trust me, if you're gonna send 3 or 4 emails to somebody and they didn't respond, chances are that the 5th time you're gonna send them an email with a similar message, they're gonna completely even ignore your name in their inbox, right? So really, this is the paradigm shift we are dealing with that needs to be addressed. And as a result, I started focusing more on social selling, and that started delivering better results for me. So let me pause here for other comments. I'd be curious to hear how
we have a great question from Ahmed. So what
Yes.
is the right way for SDR out of social media, email, and phone outreach at the current time? Tek, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and I would probably try to look at the opportunity more not as an opportunity to outreach. It's not, we're not talking about outreach, because outreach suggests that I'm going to compose a message and send it or communicate it to somebody in their inbox on social media or in their email or leaving a voicemail, right? This is more about, whatever you are selling, whatever your solution is, try to, identify and really well define the problems that it solves that are persistent or systematic for your buyers, right? And then, write an article, post something on social media, a video that educates your target audience about what it is that what problem you're looking to solve, or what are the different ways of solving a specific problem. Sharing insights as to the effective ways of addressing a specific systemic issue that your solution may solve for, right? And just really educate, right? So try to maybe shift your approach from I need to sell something to I need to have a meaningful conversation, identify a business problem, and be vocal about the business problem that my solution solves for, in different formats, whether it's video inside LinkedIn, or whether it is, posting articles with relevant research, with statistics, with insights, and also growing your network, right? And the chances are that by doing that, you will be perceived by your buyers or by your target audience as somebody who knows a lot about the subject, somebody who's trustworthy having a conversation with, right? Because you didn't try to bombard them with an email, but you have many articles, many videos on your profile that talk about the topic that they deeply care about. And when you reach out to them eventually, they may reach out to you. If you're an interesting person and they're in the cycle, or they're evaluating those kind of solutions. But if they don't, chances are that likely they'll agree to some sort of networking conversation with you, because they'll perceive you as a subject matter expert, not as a seller. That's it.
Can an SDR? Oh, sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rob. Go on.
Can an SDR be perceived as a subject matter expert? Do we just dismiss SDRs at this point?
Yeah, I think SDRs can be subject matter experts. They don't necessarily need to create, lengthy articles about the subject or be doing their own research, right? But they can certainly educate themselves about the subject and certainly repost something with their own thoughts, composed in their own words about the topic. And in fact, even before the social selling idea came on the radar, many years ago when I was just doing email and phone outreach, my goal, because I really wanted to be promoted to a field seller, right, to an account executive, my goal was to really read as many white papers as I could every week whenever I had time for it. But I would have a target, like I need to read 4 white papers this week, just so that I could have a meaningful conversation when I get somebody on the phone, right? I need to know the subject. You cannot expect to be successful as an SDR if all you are doing is just pressing buttons. You need to really try to understand what your solution is doing, what impact it drives, for what sort of business outcomes it drives for your audience, and try to essentially educate yourself to a level where you are proficiently articulating your value proposition, right? And you sound smart. So to answer your question, SDRs by all means need to educate themselves about whatever they're selling, about the business problem they're solving, and become those solution experts. Otherwise, what is the value of having a phone call with them to the perceived, to the buyers?
So Tek, I saw a comment on LinkedIn yesterday. And basically what the person was saying was that social selling takes a long time. And the reason for that is that it's based on hope. Because what you've described is what we need to do, rather than being proactive outreach, which is what most sales leaders would be expecting, is that we're going to put content out there and hopefully somebody will find it and then ring us up.
Yeah.
Which clearly we could be sitting there for 12 months.
Yeah. Well, there is also another component to it is growing your network, right? So the type of outreach that you drive as part of social selling is connecting to people, right? So you request a connection request, send a connection request to your target audience, ideally, bringing up in that request something that's relevant.
And when you send a connection request, is that connection request where you basically pitch your products?
No, it shouldn't be. It should be a connection request that suggests, hey, we have a mutual connection, right? Or we both know somebody, or I used to work with John that I see you're connected to. I find your profile interesting. I'd love to connect with you, right? And it should not have a sales message in it, like I want to talk to you about how we can solve your problem in that first outreach. But in order for your content to be visible, you need to focus on growing your network, right? Otherwise, you're just producing content and it's the same network that you've always had that sees it. So in order for your message to reach your target audience, network growth activities are mandatory. But what changes here is that once you increase your network consistently, then the content that you produce and that you post is then visible to this target audience. So in fact, you are educating them about your solution, you're educating them about solutions to their problem, the impact that the problem has on business performance, a lot of other angles, right? And without annoying them by sending them too many messages, right? They see you in their feed, and if they like it, they will click the like button. They may not do it straight away, but they certainly will see your message and without feeling that they're being intruded.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be cynical I mean, what results are you getting from this?
Sorry, say it again.
What results are you getting from this?
Well, I I was just recently looking at my statistics. So doing this for maybe about 16 or 17 weeks, the total number of conversations I've had was 33, right?
So before you were doing this, when you were cold calling, what results were you getting?
Well, when I joined the current company I work at, LiveRamp, let's say the first 3 months was just really onboarding and, right?
That's easy to around,
yeah. So I wasn't really actively prospecting because it was a very intense program. But after 3 months, I started prospecting, and I got one new business meeting in a period of about 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah, with a new logo, right?
Yeah.
Now, a total number of meetings, and please bear in mind, I had some existing accounts that were given to my patch, so more receptive to accept the meeting. But it was a total of 33 meetings, right?
Wow.
I mean, but in terms of new logos, there was about 8 or 9 new logos in it, right? So, and what 900% increase versus the the traditional approach. So it works. And now I'm just at the beginning of my journey with social selling, so hopefully more to come, right? But the early results are extremely promising.
So how do you compare to your the other salespeople in the organization? Because there must be other people in there that are knocking out the park with cold calling.
Yeah, I think it's a systemic problem in terms of new logo performance, right? Across not just my organization, but a lot of my peers from that I still maintain relationships with and friendships with. It is a systemic problem. Whoever is in charge of new logo, so new logo pursuits, right? Whoever I speak to faces that challenge. People just not responding, right? It's just very difficult to get new business meetings. Forget about meeting your pipeline requirements and goals, right? Just getting a meeting, having an intro conversation scheduled. So and what I see, the reaction of leadership across the different companies I've worked at to that problem is, well, we need to increase our numbers. We need to be doing more of prospecting, cold calling. I had situations in the recent career history where we had a cold calling blitz day. Where we
I used to do them 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. But the challenge is remote work. People are not at their desk. There is really no switchboard anymore. That or you cannot ask, can you transfer me to X, Y, and Z? That person is not going to be reached. Everybody's using the mobile phones. We don't have the mobile phones, and people are in meetings all day long. They don't pick up the call when they're in a meeting. So the channel is just not as effective. I mean, some extremely well-skilled cold callers can still get a meeting, right? But it's just the numbers. The raw numbers have diminished so much that I'm not sure if it's worthwhile the effort.
Yeah.
I want to push back there, Tek.
Adam, you're on mute, I think. We can't.
You're on mute, Adam.
Who knew? Hey, 4 years of doing stuff remotely. So, I was going to say, if we wind back to something you said earlier that we haven't explored at all yet, is you were banging your head against a wall. You said, I felt like I'd lost my mojo. I was wondering whether or not I was working at the right company. You were implying that you were not happy, that you didn't think perhaps that sales was right for you. And then 17 weeks ago, you started to do something different. So forget performance. How do you feel now about this?
Well, I feel way more motivated, right? Because, sales is a performance job, right? And we are very happy, despite the fact that we live under a lot of stress as sales professionals. We are very happy when the numbers, are there, when we are meeting our goals. When we are not meeting our goals and we continue being, doing all of the activities we historically did that worked and they no longer work, that puts a massive strain on your psychological well-being, right? So for me, I was questioning whether I want to even do sales anymore, right? Because it's just very demotivating to be to putting in a lot of hours and just not seeing results. Now, what the positive thing about social selling is the fact that you no longer are really just doing repetitive tasks of doing outreach, right? You need to, as a seller right now, in order for me to create a post, I need to read articles, I need to read research, I need to stay on top of my game and on top of all of the, industry news, and understand what's going on and what trends are happening across my clients and prospective customers. So one, consuming way more content to be able to educate myself more, right? And be able to then create something, so a meaningful piece of content that talks about those trends, talks about those issues, and then talks about the solution to those problems, right? So really, putting more emphasis on the actual research and education, right? Rather than just pure clicking and the send button in your email inbox, right? That's one thing. So overall, I think it becomes, it makes me a way more interesting person to speak to if I'm a buyer, right?
Mhm.
Two, creativity, right? There is so many different ways in which you can deliver content, right? I mean, I tested lots of different things. Some of them were successful, some of them were maybe not as successful. I even had a video where I played guitar and sang a song with
I remember that.
to the tune of Johnny Cash, right? I mean, test and learn. But the test and learn is fun because you are trying something new that you haven't done before, right? So it's stimulating for the brain, right? And so every morning I wake up like, well, what am I gonna do today? What piece of content do I want to create? That makes every single day slightly different than yesterday, and that makes my job interesting, right?
So Tek, Bob Britton's put up an interesting comment saying that
Yeah.
75% of buyers prefer not to speak with a seller.
Mhm.
So, and then is the SDR role at end of life? Do you think the fact that buyers don't want to talk to sellers is because they know that all they're going to do is try and sell them something?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why I think I disagree with the statement that SDR as a job, as a role overall in the industry is over. It's not. SDRs have not been very successful because the rules of engagement have changed, right? Buyers no longer want to be receiving emails in their inbox from 200 sellers every single day, right? But what they want to do is find the information that will help them be more effective in their role, in their job, right? They want to find solutions to business problems that will help them drive better business outcomes for the brand, and they want to only engage and spend time talking to people who they pre-qualified to be experts in the field, right? So what needs to change for SDRs? They need to start educating themselves and become those experts. They need to start being more vocal on social media. Switch the strategy from intrusion-based outreach, where you just hit somebody 100 times in a month. Maybe I've exaggerated here, but many times, right?
50 times.
And focus on adding value by sharing interesting research, interesting things, right? That this buyer will be interested to hear about, right? And then have them come to you, and if they don't come to you, they're at least more likely to accept, a networking conversation, but perhaps you're not going to be selling to them straight, but understand what is keeping them up at night and try to, if you have a solution for that, then you can position it, at some point during the call. But the idea of, of just, buyers not really wanting to be sold to is 100% accurate.
Yeah, I think so. I've got an interesting story. So I'm 100% with you that the role of the SDR has changed, or it needs to change if it hasn't within an organization. And speaking with one of my sons who has been able to demonstrate within an organization that he's got two very senior meetings, one with the CEO of a company, and he got some feedback to say, you've managed to get a meeting. You've done more in this small period of time than the previous guy before you did in the entire time he was with us. And then someone from another region reached out to him and said, "Love what you're doing. Can you send me your sales cadences?" He said, "What?" He said, "Can you send me your sales cadences?" He said, "Well, I don't have a cadence. It's a method. It's a method." and the method is largely what you're describing there, Tek, is becoming that, reading a lot of stuff so that he's an expert, but then taking the time to insert himself into conversations on social media with the right people about the topics that are relevant to them and their customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, my recommendation to SDRs is test it, right? I mean, I would never try to switch my strategy without, testing it first, right? So, maybe start with, giving yourself some sort of target for every week, educational activities, right? So I'm gonna read, at least 2 white papers, or and then I'm gonna try to turn at least one of them into a post, right? Start with that, and if you start seeing that, you enjoy doing this more than just doing repetitive tasks, right?
Yeah.
2, that probably is going to help you increase your visibility as an SDR across your own organization, right? Because you'll be doing something different than others, right? Which obviously also helps with this other, main goal really of trying to become an account executive. Let's not forget that most SDRs go into that role with a view to become salespeople in the future, right? Most of them are out of college, young professionals who want to be making a lot of money, and SDR is just the entry-level sales job. So try testing it. Don't necessarily go 100% way, all in, day one. Perhaps test and compare your results to what you've been doing historically and see if you see a lift.
Yeah.
So Tek, I actually wanted to build on one of Chris Gunn's questions. Chris, thank you so much for you regularly tune in and comment. Thank you so much for that. So Chris asked, where does AI fit into this? But I wanted to ask, what tools are you using to do this? Because this sounds like, what are the tools that are behind this?
Yeah, well, I've been increasingly using ChatGPT for certain things, right?
So what are you using AI and ChatGPT for?
Yeah, there's a number of different activities. One is to obviously streamline and drive efficiency. Right. So as a seller, I need to be aware of most of the target companies that I'm trying to target are all publicly traded companies, very large organizations, right? So being able, understanding what's going on in those companies, listening to earnings call. I was doing it with every single account historically, but I literally was listening to the earnings call, or perhaps downloaded a transcript and use the search functionality to find what are they saying about marketing, what are they saying about loyalty, what are they saying about churn, right? But now ChatGPT can summarize the entire transcript from an earnings report like within seconds. So for me, that I've been using this ChatGPT for that purpose. I also that might sound a little bit funny or weird, but English is not my first language, as you pretty sure. So for me, sometimes when I write an email or I write a script that I would like to kind of more or less stick to when I record a video for LinkedIn, for example, just loading that script and and asking ChatGPT to edit it, it just gets rid of all grammatical errors for me, and perhaps rephrases things to sound a little bit better, right? So I use it for that. Oddly, I used it also to write lyrics to a Johnny Cash song that I recorded on LinkedIn.
I think it's really interesting. It's really interesting that when Tim said to you, what do you use ChatGPT for, AI for? Most people would see this as a way of streamlining outbound. So I'm going to use this for writing scripts and sending it to people. And you said, I use it so that I can consume more stuff. I use ChatGPT to read things, to edit them down and give me a summary of them so I can get the concept really quickly and easily. And I think that's an absolutely inspired idea.
Yeah.
Because you're still doing the work to make the sale, to have the conversation, but you're using Chat GPT as a researcher. You're using it as something to brief you on the environment that you're going into. And I think that's a brilliant idea and a concept that most people probably would not have considered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure if you gentlemen have noticed that trend, but I can very easily recognize which message I receive is written by a bot, right? So if I get an email, there's tons of salespeople, trying to sell to me as well, right? Like different sales solutions and so on. And I can very easily pick up on an email that was definitely not written by a human because of the eloquent vocabulary being used and so on. So I still feel like, yeah, you can maybe use it, to help you with some editing or to shorten something or to streamline, drive efficiency in terms of the content you consume. I still personally prefer to write, my content by myself, right? Because it is really how I would say it. And it's reflective of my personality. So, I wouldn't necessarily recommend ChatGPT to just do your work for you, right? I think it can help you drive efficiencies, but I wouldn't try to count on it as a solution that's going to be writing your emails.
Yeah, and interestingly, we've got a comment here from Abhishek saying, how important is it to get SDRs in front of existing customers? And that allied to Bob's comment earlier is an SDR reaching end of life. As a buyer, my question would be, why would I want to talk to your SDR when I can talk to you? So LinkedIn, for example, if I do get a piece of content show up in my newsfeed from an SDR and it's a brilliant piece of content, the beauty of LinkedIn is that I can go and look at everyone who works within a company and decide which people I might want to talk to. So if an SDR from your company, Tek, reached out to me and said, here's a great thing that we've got and this is how it helps people, I wouldn't want to talk to the SDR. I'd message you. I mean, I know you, but if I didn't know you, I'd message you because I'd look at you and I'd go, okay, here's a guy that I have stuff in common with. We both play the guitar, for example, or you look like you're an interesting chap. You look like you understand my issues in business. Why would I talk to an SDR?
Yeah.
And my question is that SDRs, maybe they are end of life. Maybe their job is to provide you with the raw materials to make you famous, because certainly they're not helping companies to warm up prospects. They're doing quite the reverse.
Yeah, I personally feel that there's still a role for an SDR. One is it's just, it's a great resource if used wisely to help you identify the type of audiences that you are trying to reach, spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, clicking on profiles and trying to map out, doing an account plan, for example, right? Understanding who are the different influencers, stakeholders that should be in our target audience. My SDR, I have a really fantastic, person that I've been working with. I've been using her a lot also to help me with account research and plan, right? And then, I use this also as an opportunity to coach her and give her the opportunity to present the account plan to me and coach her through it, right? And like, hey, what sort of solutions would you position to address this business issue, right? It's just a little bit of a mentorship or mentoring program as well. That's what I historically like doing. It has stopped a little bit because, she just was told recently that she needs to focus on some cadences they created for her, right? But bottom line is, SDRs can be a great resource. And by the way, I don't feel, buyers, think that their time spent with an SDR will be a waste of time. I feel like SDRs help facilitate a meeting, but most of the time when they do get a meeting on the books, they include the AE straight away in that first conversation, right? So I think buyers know that, likely they're not going to be speaking just an SDR and not have their questions answered. They know pre-SDRs just help them facilitate the meeting, but somebody more senior will be in it too.
Yeah. So we've got just over 5 minutes left. There's a couple of things I wanted to raise. One is going back to something you said in relation to net new logos and existing clients. And I agree that it's hard to create meetings and opportunities with net new logos. I don't think there's any organization that I've spoken to or sales leader that I've spoken to in the last 6 months that isn't focusing on that. But you said something which I'm not sure I agree with in relation to clients and it being easier to get meetings with existing clients. Maybe with the contact that you're familiar with or the person that's familiar with your company. But I still think it's hard, if not harder, to develop additional relationships with multiple stakeholders within an existing client because you're kind of stuck with them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I do agree with that. So, good point, Alex. I'm not trying to suggest that it's very easy to get meetings with an existing client, because oftentimes it happens that, if somebody bought a solution from the company 3 years ago and they've been renewing it, and you get on the account today, or, you've been on it for a few months, you're dealing with a practitioner that is living inside your solution, right? And clicking different buttons and using the functionality. Whereas the relationship on the decision-making level, the executives that hold the budget are not necessarily involved in the day-to-day of the product, right? So you don't really have a relationship with them. So it is a challenge because, you're trying to sell them additional capabilities. You're trying to expand the relationship, but you have no relationship, although they are an existing customer, right?
Yeah.
So it is fairly challenging too. There's ways around it. You can potentially offer up, a quarterly business review, or some sort of lunch and learn. When you bring in a subject matter expert to talk about something, you bring in food. This way, you get the executives in the room at least for a few minutes, right? Introduce yourself.
If they show up.
If they show up, yeah.
Well, and thinking about social selling and how you're using that as a concept, as an approach to increase your visibility across the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do agree with you, Alex. It's not as easy as it sounds. It does require quite a bit of prospecting, relationship building activities to actually get meetings with existing customers at the right level.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the term multi-threading?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good. And so when you think about those 33 meetings that you've had, I'm making a big assumption that it's with more than one stakeholder within an organization. Is that a correct assumption? Yeah. So how do you see social selling and multi-threading? Because for years I didn't call it multi-threading, stakeholder management, complex, business development. But it was vital that you built relationships with more than one stakeholder, because more than one stakeholder is influencing the purchase decision. How are you finding doing that when you haven't yet met that individual? And do you see social selling as a key part of multi-threading today?
I think it should be. That being said, I'm not sure to be very frank with myself and you, I'm not sure whether I've been utilizing that strategy to its full potential when it comes to multi-threading. But there is, definitely an opportunity, for you to create content that is more relevant to different types of roles and buyers. So to a technical buyer, you may want to, maybe create some posts and content that's relevant to them. To an analytics buyer, in my case, for example, I sell marketing solutions and advertising solutions. So usually we have tons of analysts, data analysts, data scientists involved, marketers, as well as IT professionals, right? So these three personas, I think it's important to try to create content that addresses all three.
And pairing, and I guess with a complex B2B sale, you've got a team. It's not just you. So pairing people off with the right stakeholders on the customer side.
Absolutely, and that's when you already have a meeting. Then you bring in the right stakeholders to make sure you can address, the needs and the questions that that of every stakeholder involved on the buyer side. But just to get the meeting, right, when you are using social selling and and trying to just get a meeting, right? You maybe spoke to a person in marketing, but you haven't spoken to anybody from IT. You haven't spoken to anybody from analytics. Then obviously creating content that's relevant from the angle of the persona is key.
Yeah. And I have to jump in there because we've got less than a minute to go. But this is a great topic, and I think there's even opportunities for organizations to pair people off within the sales team and potentially the right stakeholders on the buyer side, So it's not just the sales rep that's doing social selling, but it's the team that is doing social selling to increase the chances of engaging with the right stakeholders on the buyer's side and pairing those people off early so they start to trust the different people that think and look more like them.
And to that point, Alex, I 100% agree. But and I think for this strategy to be really that effective, you need an executive sponsorship within the company, within the sellers organization, to create encourage the type of behavior, right? When you are the single person within the organization that's doing this, right? It is very difficult to convince your teammates and colleagues, hey, I want you to start doing social selling. It has to be sponsored, and it has to have an executive mandate, right, in order for this to really take off across the organization.
100%. So on that note, I want to thank you for today.
Thank you, Tek.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the audience. I would like to leave the audience with a small challenge today, because we've had some great questions, some great comments from different people, too many to name. Seems like we've got some leadership in the audience, as well as potentially some sellers and SDRs. So my challenge to you is, if you haven't already done this, have a look at your territories, have a look at your target accounts, and see how many people you're connected to on LinkedIn within each account. Is it one person? Is it 4 person? Is it 100 people? And have multi-threading in the back of your mind when you're doing that. Because if you're not well connected within an account, you're essentially invisible to that business. Cool.
Great advice, Alex.
Thank you all. Have a great
rest of the week.
Take care.
Thanks, Tek. That was brilliant. Thank you so much.